Ukrainian troops continue to hold part of the Russian Federation's Kursk region despite Russia's attempts to push them out. General Christopher Cavoli, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. European Command, said, "There are now significant forces that are holding a significant, reduced but significant, piece of land in the Kursk region of Russia, and they are holding on to very good defensive territory south of Belgorod. So we are still moving back and forth in that area," Cavoli said. The general also stressed that he opposes reducing American troops in Europe, a warning that runs counter to previous plans by the Donald Trump administration to potentially withdraw 10,000 troops. "My advice is to maintain the current position of strength," Cavoli said. This position is shared by Republicans in Congress. The chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers, spoke out categorically against the cuts. "You have to be focused on maintaining the momentum that we have had in Europe since Russia started the conflict. Premature retreat will lead to further Russian aggression." Another Republican, Don Bacon, added, "It would be a grave mistake to withdraw troops from Europe right now. Withdrawing troops is a sign of weakness." Cavoli also backed maintaining American control over NATO's SACEUR command, calling the potential transfer of that role to another country problematic. In discussing Russia's nuclear potential, Cavoli stressed the importance of the American presence in Europe. Russia continues to have very powerful strategic forces, thousands of nuclear weapons, and our defense against these strategic forces begins on the European continent. Recall Ukrainian armed forces began an operation in Kursk region in August 2024, occupying a number of settlements using the element of surprise. Later, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky explained that the operation was necessary to thwart Russian plans to attack the Sumy region. Currently, the Ukrainian armed forces are retreating in the Kursk region under the pressure of Russian troops and occupying more advantageous positions. On March the 22nd, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported that the main goals of the operation were to exhaust the enemy and destroy its personnel. They noted that the Kremlin had to create 3 new groups with a total of about 90,000 soldiers, as well as attract 12,000 North Korean servicemen to push the Ukrainian armed forces out of the Kursk region.
The U.S. Department of Defense is considering a proposal to withdraw up to 10,000 troops from Eastern Europe, a move that has sparked concern on the continent. NBC News reported this, citing informed sources. It is noted that the units under review are part of a 20,000-strong force deployed in 2022 by the administration of former U.S. President Joe Biden to bolster the defenses of countries bordering Ukraine following Russia's aggression. European officials said that if the Pentagon accepts the proposal, it would raise concerns about the United States abandoning its allies in Europe, which see Russia as a growing threat. Internal discussions about reducing American troop levels in Romania and Poland come at a time when President Donald Trump is trying to persuade Putin to agree to a ceasefire. The 6 U.S. and European officials, all of whom requested anonymity, described multiple details of the proposal that have not been previously reported to NBC News. If the Pentagon adopts the proposal, it will reinforce fears that the United States is abandoning its longtime allies in Europe who view Russia as a growing threat, European officials said. The Russians would assess a downsizing of U.S. forces as a weakening of deterrence, and it will increase their willingness to meddle in various ways across the spectrum in Europe, said Seth Jones, a senior vice president with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. The Trump administration has made it clear that it wants European allies to take more responsibility for their own defense, allowing the United States to focus its military resources on China and other priorities. In his first trip abroad as Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth said in a speech in Brussels in February that stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe. Instead, the United States would focus on securing its southern border and countering China, Hegseth said.
The internal conflict between the Kremlin and Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of Chechnya, is rapidly expanding beyond the confines of a behind-the-scenes struggle. Details have emerged about plans to hand over power to his son, contacts with Qatar, and pressure on Kadyrov's allies, which could mean the beginning of a new round of confrontation. Experts do not rule out that Russia risks entering a third Chechen war, this time within itself. Chechnya has long been perceived as a special subject, still part of Russia. Against the backdrop of weakening centralized power and growing contradictions, the situation has begun to resemble preparations for a large-scale political and military conflict. Sources of the investigative project VCHK-OGPU. There are reports of a serious rift between the Kremlin and Kadyrov, caused by his intention to transfer power in the republic to his 17-year-old son, Adam. One of the sources claims to have seen Kadyrov in person 7 days ago. According to him, if this continues, the head of Chechnya will soon be unable to perform his duties, even partially due to health problems, which is why he is actively looking for an option to preserve assets, control over Chechnya, and the safety of his family. According to sources, during the last informal meeting with Putin in August 2024, Kadyrov directly stated his desire to see Adam as his successor. However, the Kremlin responded with a categorical refusal. After that, according to interlocutors, Kadyrov began secret negotiations with the leadership of Qatar, where two of his closest confidants are already located. Against the backdrop of Kadyrov's deteriorating health, his entourage began actively restructuring the internal mechanisms of governing Chechnya. An unofficial ban was introduced on the activity of Chechen security officials and racketeers outside the region, including Kadyrov's closest ally, State Duma deputy Adam Delimkhanov, who was given to understand that any participation in the showdown in the capital could result in the surfacing of old, forgotten cases. The sources also say that the FSB has passed on to the Kremlin information about Kadyrov's numerous unauthorized negotiations with Middle Eastern Muslim states regarding the future of his family's assets and personal security. This has become one of the main reasons for the breakdown of trust between Putin and Kadyrov. Russia has already experienced two bloody Chechen campaigns in the 1990s and the early 2000s. Both began as internal conflicts that escalated into full-scale military action. Today, despite Chechnya's formal subordination to Moscow, the public behaves like an independent state with its own order, army, and external contacts. This makes the risk of a third Chechen war quite real. While the Kremlin maintains an outward calm, the problems are multiplying. Chechnya's autonomy is growing. The vertical of power is weakening, and the very idea of Russian unity is being undermined. The conflict between Putin and Kadyrov is no longer just a personal quarrel. It is a symptom of a deep crack in the country's political body.